All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Baker's Do Video Games Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Baker. Say hello to my co-host and my little brother Noah.
What's going on, Brandon?
Not a lot, man. We got a different and kind of more of an interesting episode because we, for the first time, have a guest. So, um, without jammering around, we'll just go ahead and get into this, man. Say hello to our guest, Josh.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me, guys.
yeah, we really appreciate you coming on, and I couldn't think of a better first guest than you, man.
Aw.
Just a little bit of background. I have known Josh since what? I don't remember. Did we go to elementary school together, or has it been since like sixth grade?
Mostly sixth grade, but I bounced around between so many elementary schools. I actually knew Remy in second grade and didn't even know it until later on. So like there was a bunch of people that remembered me like starting up class and then getting pulled out because mom enrolled me in the wrong district. That's what
Nice.
so people yeah.
That's hilarious because I've known Remy since kindergarten.
Yeah. Like him and Aaron and like there was like a whole group of kids that just knew everybody, but then they remembered me popping in once like a blip and then just mysteriously vanishing as soon as I came in.
That's so funny. That's probably why I mostly remember you from middle school because I remember you living just right down the street from the school.
Yeah, yeah. Right down the road from city when I was living with grandma and grandpa.
Yeah, yeah, because I remember coming over there a few times, and that's kind of how um, I guess I kind of knew who you were and what you liked a little bit, even though we were young.
Yeah. And then drawing class in high school. That's when we really got to bond.
So yeah, so we've known each other for quite some time. I one reason why I like doing this podcast is because we're obviously older. We're in our mid, I hate to say late 30s, so I'm just gonna stick with mid 30s. And then my little brother is 19. He's just a youngin. So our spectrum on all this stuff is just so different. So it's kind of cool being able to do this. So I'll be interested to see what he may have to say whenever you start talking about things that you like and what you've done in the past. Without let's just get into it, guys. So, Josh, all right, what are you currently doing? The big reason why I wanted you to come on is because of the project you're actually working on. So, just kind of tell us a little bit about what you're doing and just kind of plug your info, man.
All right, certainly. Thank you.
Yeah.
So online, I my persona is Fallen Frog, which I actually got that name in seventh grade at Studi in social studies class with Mr. Stratton, and someone like we had to give each other names and whatever, and that's how I got the name Fallen Frog. Um, but I've been using that to make YouTube videos, gaming videos. Um, Most recently, I've for the last couple of years, I've been working on my own game. I'm started building it in different engines at different opportunity, different points in its development cycle, like Godot engine, and trying to use C sharp and all this stuff. But I finally settled on RPG Maker. I'm working on just a little fan project. It's a Ninja Turtle um, sort of Ninja Turtles, the arcade game meets Final Fantasy, and utilizing all those sprites and making a bunch of my own sprites as well. Um, just really as a way to like work on my art. I like to do digital art, and pixel art is something that I've always wanted to break into, and that's been a lot of fun. I've been funding that game on Patreon, support me there, just to chase that dream and be a game developer, and then putting the patrons in the game during a nightclub scene where the turtles get to fight Toka and Razor. It's the game itself is like a love letter to the old movies because mid 30s we grew up with Ninja Turtle Mania. Like I'm obsessed with them. So my favorite franchise out of Marvel, everything you name it, it's Ninja Turtles hands down. And so yeah, just people always tell you, not to copyright and stuff. You got to be careful. It's not a game I'm selling or anything by any means. It's going to be a free game to put out there for everybody just to get some enjoyment out of it, and kind of just a love letter, to the fans. Sort of like how Rick and Morty was you know, a play on Back to the Future, and
Right.
kind of became its own thing. So
Awesome, man. Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. We grew up with the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle like franchise, the original trilogy. Don't really care too much for the third, but the first and second movies were just fantastic. I'll still watch the third one to this day because I still have, a little bit of a love for it, and it's nostalgic, but overall, I love the movies the best.
yeah, that original one is just chef's kiss right there.
Noah, have you ever seen the original Ninja Turtles trilogy from the 90s?
I honestly don't think I have. I love Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I have since I was little. But I remember watching the cartoon. I don't know what it was, if I'm being honest. But yeah, I remember at Halloween I actually got a Teenage Mutant like Raphael outfit, and I wore it for Christmas, and or Halloween, pardon me, and I had the shell on the back and stuff. So I liked them, and I watched what I could watch, but I wouldn't say I'm like a diehard fan. I don't really know all the releases and the order they came out and all that fun stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah, we got to be fans of the original like top-down Nintendo game. It was on the original Nintendo, right?
Yeah, that from Konami.
Yes, man, that game was fantastic. I remember playing that all the time as a kid.
And between playing that one and my mom would play Final Fantasy, and seeing the top-down view, I always was like, what if someone combined these two games? Like, as a little kid, and that's what made me want to take this game, because like those top-down graphics, I love that. I love being able to walk around the overworld and then jump into the sewers.
Mm-hmm.
Too bad it was so hard.
Yeah, I really like that style. That's why I really like Link to the Past is probably my favorite of all time Zelda games. But anyway, so besides, we're gonna get out of that. But back now, is this the first game that you dabbled with?
Not really. No, I've made a few games, just like little, basically clones, like Pac-Man and Snake and different things like that. I started my journey with code actually started in high school. I took an introduction to programming class, and I started making a bunch of Mad Libs. I took everything that we had learned over the course of the whole year and just started working on my own like Mad Lib generator program. And my teacher loved it. He was like, you passed the class, you aced it. Wanted to go into game design and everything. But I really would say I'm more of an artist than a coder. I hate actually kind of writing code.
Gotcha. Okay. So now is your basic like dream job to work in game development?
I think so. Maybe game development or character design, I think. I've always like I kind of want to bounce around to different projects and kind of be a jack of all trades. Like I don't want to limit myself to just strictly game development, but I love coming up with like new characters or enemy designs, and I like doing little animations. I've done full-blown like 2-minute cartoons and stuff, but I really like making an animated GIF, or a jumping animation or a walk cycle, which goes hand in hand really. So
Okay. So would you ever want to work for like an actual game studio, or would you rather be more independent?
ooh, I'm at the point in my like right now, since I'm still at the beginning of like everything, I'd really want like a real legit job with a company. But then you also got stuff, like Activision with their frat boy culture and stuff, and then EA, like there's crunch times and the development cycles and stuff, and it like the freedom of being an indie creator is really nice because you can set your own hours and just work at your own pace. You don't have someone breathing down your neck, and you know, also would hate to be lumped into one of those scandals or something just because of like, you know, the top brass in the company is running it in the ground or something.
Right.
You know, all those horror stories. So
yeah, that's kind of a big thing in, I guess, gaming culture right now as a whole. Well, the industry, the gaming industry right now, and a lot of different studios have been targeted for their crunch time and putting people through the hours that they've been to come up with releases and get them on schedule. Like I can think of Rockstar Games with Red Dead, the last Red Dead game. There was an article that came out on Time Crunch. Um, let's see, CD Project Red lately was one. So apparently that's
like
a big deal right now.
80-hour work weeks and
Mm-hmm.
sleeping under your desk. Like, no, thank you.
Kind of reminds me of Grandma's Boy, if anyone's ever seen that movie.
Yes, I love Grandma's Boy.
Hilarious. So that kind of leads me into a question that I had. What are your thoughts currently on the gaming industry and what it is now compared to what it was back in the day when I guess it was more simpler?
Yeah, when things were like, I don't think my first thought was like thinking of like the video game crash in like the 70s and 80s before the NES came out. And like when it was simpler, you had everybody just pushing out all that shovelware on Atari, and it kind of imploded on itself, and then Nintendo reignited it. I don't think anything like that is going to happen again, but because it's just too, like, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. But they definitely need some sort of a shakeup or something, because a lot of, like, I love the indie scene. Like all the indie creators are, you know, a lot of them are making pixel art games, so they're throwbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And then your AAA studios, they're putting out, for me, I just get less and less excited every year. I feel like they're all copy and paste of last year's game
Oh yeah.
with a reskin. And then, of course, if you want different skins on that, you can pay for those with your wallet. I'm really excited about virtual reality. Like, I think that's like the next true evolution in like bridging gaming and, you know, all the media and stuff. But it's going to have to get to more people can easily access it, I guess, because like the bulky headsets and the high price tags, and then, you know, face with Oculus and stuff. Like, I don't know if you guys have got to jump into Alex or anything, but one of those virtual reality games where you're like really in there. But I think that's where it's going.
See, I've not really dove into any of the virtual reality yet just because I'm so old school. And it's honestly one of the reasons why I never really got through a Nintendo after probably N64. I didn't really dabble much in the GameCube, but I'm just so old school with controllers. And when the Switch came out, I was like, no, this ain't for me. Then the Wii came out, I was like, nah, I'm good. And I'm so old school. Give me a controller, give me a TV, let me just play. You know what I mean? And so I've not really dove into any of the virtual reality yet. But one thing I did want to touch on that you mentioned on reskin, basically, I feel like every time a new Assassin's Creed or what's the other? Um,
Far Cry.
yes, Far Cry. Yes, both of those. Time they come out with a new one, it's like the exact same thing again. There's not
Yep.
any difference between the new one and the last one besides characters.
Yeah. And half the time they recycle the same voice actors too. They just, you know, gruff up their voice more or tweak it slightly. You've always got Nolan North or Troy Baker, you know, like the same
Yeah.
dudes doing the same generic guy.
That was one issue I always had. So Bethesda Game Studios is hands down my favorite video game studio of all time. They make most of my favorite games. Um, and that was one of the issues I had with some of their early games, like Oblivion, Morrowind, Fallout, the original Fallouts. Basically, all the same voice actors were used for so many different characters. Like you can go in Oblivion and talk to 30, 40 different characters, and they all are voiced by the same guy.
Yeah. They hired like Patrick Stewart and one other guy to do voices in that game.
Oh man. Another thing that you touched on that I was actually mentioning is microtransactions. I feel like that is the theme of video games right now, and I feel like it's a terrible theme.
I'm having a little bit of like developer side perspective on microtransactions. I'm okay when they're unobtrusive, when they don't, like tip the scales in gameplay wise, if it's like a competitive game. But I don't like them being in like a $60 retail game that, we buy for the Xbox or PlayStation. You bring it home and then, oh, I want this cool skin for my Jedi in Star Wars, but it's $15 only. Like, and you can't earn anything in game. Like you earn in-game money. Every game has a currency form that you earn, but a lot of them have 2 or 3, and some of them you have to specifically buy this particular crystal in order to buy this particular skin you want. You have to pay for it. There's no, like, when we were growing up playing games, and like you beat the game, you got that sense of accomplishment, and then you unlocked a new costume. That was really cool.
Right.
But for free to play games, I do see the value in that for, being able to support the developers and support a game that you like, especially if you download a game that you're like, okay, it's free, give this a go, and then you spent 20 hours on it in the last 3 days and you've been just, addicted to it or whatever. It's nice to, throw $1 towards the developers just to help them keep the lights on.
Right.
But in my $60 games, my Call of Duties and stuff, like, rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are those free to play games that I definitely 100% agree. Like, microtransaction. You're putting the content out, and how else are you going to pay for it if people aren't buying the extra stuff? That's 100%. It's like you said at the beginning, when it's tilting the game in your favor as far as outcome with, playing against people online, things like that. When it's not evened up, like that's when it's not fair, not cool.
Richie Rich is using his dad's credit card to buy tanks in GTA Online. He's level 4. Like, see a level 4 coming at you, you don't expect him to be flying in an Apache helicopter, but no, here he is because daddy's a CEO of Starbucks or something. So
that's one reason why we'll get into about GTA 5 online and more, because you step into the game, you die.
Question for Josh. And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, but you guys were talking about the fact that you're old school gamers, and I think that's kind of sick. Sometimes I wish I was born in the 90s so I could have got that, experience, or late 80s or whatever. But for Josh, what are your thoughts on remasters? Because, we see Zelda, they just came out with Skyward Sword remastered. They did Link to the Past remastered, and then they're going nuts with the Pokemon remasters. Do you think that remasters ruin the original game? Like, do you think that developers need to be making original content whenever we get this far away from those older games, or are you a fan of remasters?
Great question. I really am a fan of them for the most part. Even if they don't really do anything to the new, if they just port an older game over and make it accessible on like the new generation of hardware, I am a fan of that, even just as its bare bones, because it preserves that gaming history. It sucks when you have like, I'm not a big into the Silent Hill franchise, but I know that like the Silent Hill HD collections that were brought over to like PlayStation 3 or 4 and Xbox 360 or 1, when they brought those over, like they were just but they also weren't the best of ports. Like they had like a lot of bugs and issues. Um, I wish they got a little more attention and love, because when you do get the remaster, bring over some of these franchises like to a new generation. Like the most recent one I can think of that like has blown me away is the Tony Hawk remaster of 1 and 2, and just making that gameplay, like, first of all, like, it's nostalgic for me hearing that soundtrack, and it's giving me, like, we could just go into music on that game, but like having that, like, being able to play that with my kids now. They've played the original Tony Hawks with me on like the classic PlayStations and stuff, but seeing it with like a fresh coat of paint, like made with the Unreal Engine and like all these new graphics, like that's also really cool. So I'm all for them, really, just because I want to preserve the video game past. Like Oregon Trail, like Oregon Trail is a game that we used to play in school that was like a learning game, but
Yes.
I've always wanted to see that get brought back and done with like Unreal Engine. Like if they brought that with Unreal Engine 5 and it turned into like a Cabela's hunting game, and then like, can you imagine?
I couldn't imagine. I mean,
but then unlocking, and maybe then like once you beat it, like you can unlock the original Oregon Trail and like just have that as I like that it's easily accessible, because I mean, to load up DOS or any of the old programs that you would need just to get the games to function could be a nightmare. So it is nice just for preserving the past.
Yeah, that was a fantastic question, Noah, because I actually was going to ask you a little bit about that too, as you mentioned it. Like, for instance, Link's Awakening, that the one that they just remastered, I think it came out on the Game Boy originally. I think it's awesome when they do stuff like that, because it brings like a newer generation. They get to see what we got to see back then, but it obviously looks a million times better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like remasters. And honestly, I think they fit some games, and some games I don't. Like the old Pokemons, I stinking loved those games, and going the overhead view that you guys were talking about on the older games, that was probably one of my favorite things. With the Game Boy and the DS, because I did play some of that growing up, but I loved those. And then you got into the soundtrack, and honestly, music is like probably sticks out to me more than even some of the games. And Brandon and I talked about it before, but I've got literally a whole playlist of video game music, and I turn it on at work and I listen to it, and I turn it on when I read, and I listen to Skyrim music while I read a book. And so the music's totally nostalgic for me. And so I'm kind of with you, Josh. I think remasters are great for certain games. I do think there's some games they should just leave alone. Honestly, like for me, the Donkey Kong games, I'm not a fan of them remastering those games, just because for me, those games, the classic games, that's where it was, and I don't want to see them try to overdo anything. So that's just my opinion on the remasters. But yeah, I'm all about them.
Yeah. So, for instance, the Link's Awakening came out in '93 on Game Boy, and you were born in '01, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what we got to see on Game Boy, you're getting to see in like a complete different skin, and like I think that's really cool. So, anyways, yeah, fantastic question, dude.
Sometimes I show my kids an old screenshot and I'll be like, this is what this game looked like back when I was a kid. And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, ew.
Yes. Could you, well, for instance, you were talking about TMNT. Could you imagine like a reskin version of the Nintendo top down?
Like I do imagine it, and like it's what drives me to keep plugging away like till 3 a.m, like banging my head against my keyboard. Why can't this work?
So do you spend more time playing video games, or do you spend more time developing them?
I used to spend more time playing, but now I spend more time drawing and working on them. And it's not all just because I want to work on my games. Part of it is like what I was talking about earlier with like games nowadays just seem of last year's
Mhm.
game. So like, I'm just not as excited. I get more excited when they announce a remaster or something new that is exciting for me, but it's like maybe years away.
Right.
Perfect Dark is like probably my most anticipated game coming out, and like I don't even know if it's gonna be good. We don't know much about it, but that was my favorite game on the 64. And then that Ninja Turtles like beat 'em up game. Really before that, like there's outside of that, everything else is kind of on. I have a version of that I could play if I wanted to. So
Yeah. So,
I don't really play as much. Yeah.
yeah, video games nowadays, like you said, man, I swear, it's like it's when it gets to the point of where there's a 2, a 3, and a 4. That's when it seems like they're just reskinning the last one. There's not too much creativity anymore. There's not a whole lot of new,
Yeah.
like something different, something new. Like
They're
that's
not
that's
taking as many chances, it seems
right.
like.
Right, yeah, exactly. Take a chance, and that's what's cool about the like indie studios. For instance, I'll throw one out there. I still haven't played it yet, but I'm very intrigued, and I thought it looked fantastic. Cuphead.
Love
Um,
Cuphead.
do you? Okay, so yeah, that game just looks really cool. I thought I like the idea of it, and it did super well. And it came from an
I
indie developer.
Yeah. Yeah, I pre-ordered Cuphead because I remember the first time we saw a trailer at E3. I being a fan, like I love cartoons, I love animation and all of that stuff. So like seeing that style they had, like they nailed it. And then it was like 3 years later before the game even came out. Had it pre-ordered because I love old school side scroller games. Still haven't even beat it. Like I'm on World 3. That game is so hard. So ridiculously hard. I don't know if you guys have seen. There's a Polygon video where the play the game, and he literally couldn't get past the tutorial. He
Oh
couldn't get
my!
past like the jump, and you have to do a dash to get over the ledge, and it's like 4 minutes of him struggling with what would be, anyone who's would naturally just be like, oh, okay, we do this because he was doing the dash in the air and stuff too. Hilarious. Game is so hard. Love it though.
Well,
And they were
especially probably older generations of video gamers where we came up with like the side scroll games and the top down games, so we're more familiar with the tricks and how to do those type of things
and you
with
also had limited lives and stuff too. So like
right.
nowadays you just hide behind a rock and your health will heal, and developers want you to be able to experience the whole thing, so they make sure to kind of hold your hand and guide you. And if you die too many times, here's a golden star to run through the level. But man, they did not hold your hand when we were kids.
No, not at all. Not at all. um okay, so let's see. Are you working on any other projects right now as far as like with your art or any upcoming games that you want to try and do?
uh, I do have another game engine. It's Pixel Game Maker, and it's like very similar to RPG Game Maker, which is what I'm using to make the Ninja Turtles RPG. And it lets you do side scroller games. I've played with it a little bit, so I could do uh, toying with the idea of like making my own like Metroid clone or something, or Super Meat Boy type game.
Okay.
I Virtual reality is another one. Like I want to explore playing with virtual reality. Um, Maybe making like a first person shooter where you get abducted by aliens, just to have the experience of being abducted by aliens in VR, like getting sucked into the ship and then being strapped to the table and getting like about to get operated on or something, but then somehow you break out and then it becomes like Doom in space.
Nice. Yeah, that'd be cool.
I think that would be pretty cool. Yeah.
All right.
Speaking of VR, you can play Skyrim in VR or Fallout 4 in VR.
I know.
If you didn't know that, like
I thought
that
about
would be selling point for you.
Yeah, I've thought about getting a VR for my. Well, I'll probably wait and do it on the next console, but I've definitely thought about it. What about like with your drawing, or is there any projects you're doing with that, or have you ever thought about like doing a book or anything like that?
I have actually. So I did start publishing books on Amazon. I made, like this comic book template book. So I've got 4 kids, and they're all artists just like me. Especially my oldest daughter, Annabelle. She's like, and it's crazy because she can draw realistic stuff really good, like realistic eyes and lips. I can't do that. Everything I do is cartoons. And and if any of the listeners didn't know, I did the art for the Bakers Do Gaming podcast, and
Yes.
I drew Brandon and Noah, and I've also done Fallout versions of them, and I just really like to, since I'm a fan of cartoons, I just like to replicate that style and draw people in those styles as like Simpsons characters, which is something I did for my whole family one year for Christmas. And then I do that for people. I can, do custom portraits where, your cartoon characters. I've started publishing books, like the comic book template book I made, and some notebooks, and playing with different designs there. And I have thought about doing a children's book. I don't know what story I would tell, but I've always wanted to do actually a cartoon. I'm kind of like, when I first was thinking about it, it was like a cartoon about like NPCs, right? Living in a video game world. And you've got the player who's like Link, running around destroying all the pots in their house and cutting their grass, causing trouble for him. And you got like, what would the villagers like? What would their lives be like? And try to wrap a whole show around that.
Wow,
While
that's
I
a
was
cool concept.
while I was working on it, they came out with Wreck-It Ralph, and I was like, oh well, they just stole my idea. And then now they got Free Guy coming out with Ryan Reynolds, and it looks like the same thing, but looks awesome. But like, I've always wanted to do, I think, a cartoon like that. I don't know if you've ever seen Code Monkeys, Brandon, but it was it was an old cartoon that was on G way back in the day, and it was.
I thought it sounded familiar.
Yeah, and it was all pixel based and stuff, and it took place in the 80s, and they developed games, and their boss wasn't a gamer. He was like an oil tycoon, and he was just like wanting to put out whatever games he could, but it was really funny. I've always so cartoons. I would like to do my own animated show, maybe for like Netflix or something, sign a deal with them and make my own cast of characters and hire a team and just like create. I don't know.
That'd be awesome. I mean, you definitely clearly got the talents for it. You saw, I don't know if you've seen Kevin Smith. He recently just did basically like a continuation of the original He-Man.
Yes.
Universe, and brought it to Netflix. And if you've ever seen Kevin Smith movies, he's not the best. I mean, I do enjoy some of his movies, but he's not the best when it comes to movies. So, and you clearly got talent. So, man, you could probably do something like that on Netflix if he can. Come on now.
Well, thanks.
but no. In all seriousness, though, you do good work, and if you get a chance, check out the He-Man, because this is the first thing that I've actually really liked of his. I watched the first episode while I was running this morning, and I was actually impressed with it.
He-Man was always one of those properties that, like, I had a bunch of toys as a kid because like garage sales and stuff, but like anytime I think about the property of like He-Man and stuff, I just kind of roll my eyes. I'm like, oh gosh, But like, I haven't even watched the trailer, but I know that he's doing it, and like people are actually blown away by it. Like, I've seen people sharing the trailer and being like, yes, this is what I wanted. So I'm happy for the He-Man fans.
Yeah, I actually enjoyed it. I would never necessarily say I was like a big fan, but I remember watching it as a kid and stuff.
I used to watch the movie.
Oh my gosh, that thing was
with Dolph Lundgren.
Yeah, rough.
Very rough. And Courtney Cox.
So one of my next questions, Noah kind of hit on it a little bit with video game music. Is there any video game music that you can just kind of like set and listen to and just really vibe to?
Oh yeah, for sure. I actually, back in high school, I was big on Newgrounds and like all day after school playing flash games and stuff and downloading their music. Someone had put out a Nintendo Concierto, and it's like they just did like this whole concert on piano. Like it was like 20 hours worth of just like different renditions of like, you know, the water theme from Donkey Kong Country or Hyrule Fields from 64, and like just blended them all together. Love stuff like that. One of my favorite genre of music, actually, everyone asks me, you know, like what's your favorite type of music, you know, like what do you listen to? My favorite type of music is actually 8-bit covers of pop songs.
Nice.
So if you like 8-bit universe on YouTube, like check them out. They do, like, if you like Uptown Funk, they've got an 8-bit version of it. And you can like still sing it along, but it's got all those, it's just, that is my favorite type of music. So yeah, I can listen, like I might roll my eyes at like Justin Bieber or Taylor Swift songs when my kids play them, but I'll throw on the cover version and they'll recognize the song and be like, hey, and I'll be like, yeah, now it's better.
Better.
I improved it.
I'm the same way as far as I'll roll my eyes at something like that, but then there's like this metal band that I listen to called Our Last Night, and they'll do a cover of a Justin Bieber song. I'm like, okay, see, now I like this.
Yeah. I Prevail, Blank Space. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's much better whenever the cover of those pop artists. But okay, cool. So yeah, I kind of like Noah. I'll listen to all sorts of different music all day at work. There's a group on YouTube that I subscribe to called the Game Brass, and they do all sorts of different Nintendo covers, but it's all with brass instruments. And so go check
The
out
Game Brass.
the Game Brass.
That's awesome. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I love brass instruments. Like I love it when you hear instruments that you don't actually hear. Like everyone's got like a singer, a guitarist, a bassist, and a drummer. Like give me a trumpet, throw like some bagpipes in there, or like violins. Like
yeah, you got to check them out because they have some fantastic covers, and it's all just brass instruments. But okay, so next question, man. Do you have an all-time favorite video game? That's kind of hard to pinpoint, but if you could say one, what would it be?
the one I always jump to in my head is Perfect Dark on Nintendo 64.
Okay.
But I feel like it would be Tony Hawk's Pro Skater or one of the Ninja Turtles games or even Halo, but no, it's like for some reason in my head, still Perfect Dark 64 or even the remake they did on Xbox Live, like for the 360.
Okay.
But I think it's more that would be my desert island game. Like that's the game I could play single player, but then I could do multiplayer with bots, and like I feel like every time, because it still is, I still enjoy it, but I know it would get old on a desert island. It's so limited. Like why not go with GTA or The Witcher 3, you know, like one of those big open world games, but no, I want this little 512 megabyte 64 game.
That's awesome. Yeah, we did a like a top three, and I feel like we both had like several honorable mentions because it's kind of hard to just pinpoint.
It's so hard. Yeah. I'm going to hurt those other games' feelings if I leave them out.
Right, exactly. All right. So, on a little bit of a more serious topic, I kind of wanted to bring this up. I remember when I was running through podcast ideas, this is one that I think me and you had talked about possibly having you on for. But I'm just going to throw the question out there. We can kind of talk about it a little bit. But what's your thoughts on violence in video games in our society, and do the two actually go hand in hand or not?
I
broad, it's not like this, yeah, but just kind of your idea.
I think at face value, there's really no correlation. I remember in high school when GTA, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas had come out, and then there was the PC mod, the hot coffee mod, which like looking at GTA games now, like everything that you can do with like going to the strip clubs and stuff, it's unbelievable that this would be a thing that was in the news, but you couldn't do all that stuff in the game like it is portrayed now. But they had deleted it. They were going to include some of that stuff, and they deleted it, but fans were able to re-enable it through a mod. Okay. And all the senators, particularly Jack Thompson from Florida, he was a lawyer, and he was really on his crusade against violent video games. And they were like saying, this game's Grand Theft Auto. It lets you just, run around. Like, they were really hard on Rockstar Studios for a long time about every game they put out, even Bully, which didn't let you do anything, but they were like, it's a game that promotes school shootings. And I think there's definitely a mental health crisis in the country. Mm-hmm. And when you have something like that, and then you have the kind of media that Americans and, people all over the world really, but particularly Americans, like, I know that's my source, my point of view is what the American culture feeds us. It is a lot of gunplay, violence, getting revenge, avenging a loved one, just pain, and, taking the law up into your own hands. So it does feed into those ideas, but I think, for the most part, if you're well balanced and there's so many variables. There's just so many variables, like what kind of home life a person has, what kind of grasp on reality that person has. If they're not grounded in reality and can't separate fact and fiction and, entertainment, then you could have some, problems, especially if they're not getting, any sort of love or reciprocation or anything in their personal life. So they might want to get some ideas from something and take it out on the world. But I mean, that's not a video game's fault. Like, violence has been a part of human culture since before video games, before Pong came out.
Yeah. And, that's kind of where I am with it is my thoughts have always been, how can you target video games when there's movies as well, or TV?
Yeah.
When they do the exact same thing.
And before that, it was books and cave drawings and
yeah, exactly. So, okay. Noah, what do you think, man?
Man, I think that the people who say it's the video game's fault, they need to be put away. Because, I mean, if you think about it, if we're going to go real technical and, you get with gun violence and it's the same thing, the gun's not the one that killed the person. Ultimately it's the person with the gun. And I'll stand by that till I die. I don't think we can blame video games. I think that we do need to be careful, who gets their hands on video games, violent video games. But I think that at the end of the day, it's not the video game's fault that someone went and killed someone, or, someone did something terrible. At the end of the day, that's the person who played it. So, I mean, my only thing would be, figure out a way to restrict who plays it. But I don't think that it's the violence. I don't have a problem with violence in video games. And at the end of the day, like I said, I think it's just the people who plays it.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's kind of like with, music at the same time. I remember when I was a kid, my parents were like, why are you listening to that one, blah, blah, if you listen to that, and I remember listening to some of the, like, dirtiest hip-hop music as a kid, and I never went out, and I was never a pimp. I was, you know what I mean? Like, I never did. But I see kind of what both of you said, where, it all determines on whose hands it may fall in, or who, but that's, with any kind of media. So, okay, cool. All right. Well, this is kind of my last question. I've always heard the statement from people, games are for kids. Why are you this many-year-old adult and playing video games, blah, blah, blah. What is your thoughts on the statement, video games are for kids?
Anybody who thinks that and just brushes them off, I think there's a game for them. They just haven't found it yet. Um, this might sound come across bad, but I just think it's an ignorant statement. Like it's made out of ignorance. They're not for kids. It's art, and it's subjective to, art is in the eye of the beholder. Um, I'm almost 40, and I have Ninja Turtles all over my room, blanket that I sleep with every night. Like, uh, at the end of the day, it's like whatever people are passionate about, I think. And video games are like, anyone who wants to say games are for kids, like, I won't say like GTA will make someone a murderer, but tell me that game is for kids. Like, that's not a game for kids. Manhunt, like, uh, just like books, like, I would say books are for kids, but not all books are for kids. You got your Danielle Steele novels and your Stephen King novels, and even other racier things. Like, I mean, it's all art. It's all art, and I think they should be, like, talking about, like, going back to the video violence of video games. Like, I like the ESRB system. It's good to, because of, people need to be aware of what kind of content is in the media that you're purchasing.
Mm-hmm.
If there's going to be heavy drug use, maybe you're opposed to that. You should, it's nice to have that on the back of the box. Or if it's, people who are prone to seizures, having that seizure warning, and, violent language, just whatever it is. So, but it's all art.
Right. Yeah. One thing that I've always brought up to people is I don't think they can even understand how good some of the storytelling is in video games, and how some of them play out like a movie, or
BioShock, perfect example.
man, definitely that is a very good example. Another
You
one,
can't do that in a movie.
no, definitely not. The Last of Us is one I was. The storytelling in that game is magnificent, and I cannot wait to watch the HBO rendition when it comes out, because that's just something I remember playing it and was like, man, this just the story, like, I don't know, it's just crazy how good some of these storytellers are, and the writing in these video games. And um, that's kind of where I always lean to whenever I tell people I'm
Yeah, like, that one's more than, like, that one's not copy, cut and paste and just do the generic formula. Like, they had a great story to tell, and it was and Red Dead Redemption story. Like,
Mhm.
there's some that are just so elevated beyond everything else you see, that they do stand out, that it's like, it's worth checking out. And even if you're not a gamer, like, watch the YouTube playthrough, get that
Right,
story. It's good.
right.
It's
Yeah,
juicy.
I can think of a few games that I've actually checked out through YouTube and watched just the like playthroughs, because I was like, I don't think I'm really interested. But then I would watch it. I'm like, my gosh, the story is fantastic.
I did that for Spider-Man before I bought a cheap PS4 and played it myself.
That Spider, fantastic, and
Oh yeah, made me cry. So
yeah.
good.
Also, uh, that was a good example of the skins, man. You got to actually just unlock those classic style where you played it and you unlocked the suits. You didn't have to
I
buy.
love that. Yeah, just going around finding backpacks, and it's like, oh sweet, I unlocked a new suit. I'll only wear
Yes.
it one time maybe, but this is pretty cool. Like, it's a good feeling. I remember this
Noah
feeling as a kid.
Noah loves that game. And yeah, I don't know, it's just fun. But man, that's kind of all I got. Noah, is there anything that you had to ask, or anything that you wanted to talk about?
And I don't think so. I think I got all my questions out of the way.
All right. Well, man, Josh, thank you so much for joining us and just talking to us about things that you're passionate about. Um, I appreciate that. Hopefully, we can get you back on again if you'd like.
Definitely. Thank you for having me. This was a blast. I haven't podcasted in so long. It's nice to get back into it.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again, guys. I'll make sure and link his YouTube and his Patreon. My gosh, in the comment section. whenever I upload this and share it. So make sure you give him some love, support him, because like he said, he's putting this game out that he's making for free. He's not selling it. The only way to actually really continue to do it is by the support. So make sure you're going out and supporting him. Like I said, I'll link it. And a little bit of housekeeping real quick. Remember, we're going to try and do a giveaway in the future, but the only way you're going to be able to be a part of that is if you're commenting and sharing this. And also, I would like to try and start streaming soon, which when that happens, I'm just going to kind of throw out a list of games and kind of just let you guys choose. And, I'll stream that specific game that has like the most votes or whatever. So stay on the lookout for that. But I'm also not going to start streaming until we have more of an audience. So get out there and listen. So, all right, I'm just going to drop this. Guys, thank you so much for listening, and game on.